When a man starts to wake up, he naturally starts to drift away from the crowd, not because he hates people, but because the usual ways of relating stop making sense to him. Most conversations circle around status, gossip, or complaints, and once he starts seeing through that, it becomes harder to stay engaged. He's not bitter. He's not isolating himself out of pride. He's just stopped pursuing what others are still chasing. He starts to notice the performance in everyday interactions, the need to be liked, to belong, to say the acceptable thing. And without announcing it, he quietly steps aside. People may still wave. They may still offer small talk, but the connection is no longer there because it was never truly real in the first place. He didn't cut people off. He didn't destroy bridges. He just stopped pretending. And once he does that, distance appears on its own. This is the beginning of solitude, not loneliness, but space between who he once was and who he is becoming. He starts to clearly see that what keeps many people close isn't real. It's not depth. It's not honesty. It's habit, comfort, and shared illusions. People bond over complaining about their work, chasing status, defending beliefs they've never genuinely examined. He used to do the same. He used to believe that was connection. Now it feels like background noise. He notices how often people talk simply to avoid silence. How much effort goes into maintaining appearances, the constant craving for validation, agreement, reassurance. And once he no longer needs those things, he sees how much others still rely on them. He sees how many relationships survive not because of truth, but because everyone silently agrees to keep the story going. He understands why people cling to what feels familiar. He still cares. He still listens. But he no longer plays along. That shift, as subtle as it is, creates distance all by itself. From the outside, he may look the same. He still shows up. He's still courteous. He hasn't completely disappeared. But something essential has moved inside him. And the people around him can sense it, even if they can't explain it. They notice that he's no longer trying to impress anyone, no longer seeking approval, no longer playing the social game. Some find this inspiring, others find it unsettling, because he's no longer simple to read, no longer performing a role for anyone. He doesn't flatter, doesn't compete, doesn't entertain, and that makes him hard to categorize. People might say he's distant, too quiet, or that he's changed. What they really mean is that he no longer fits the image they built of him. They preferred him when he reflected their own values back to them. Now he reflects something different, something steady and not dependent on being liked. People see him, but they don't truly know him, because to know him now would require seeing what he sees. And most people aren't ready for that. He once believed that staying connected meant being constantly involved, showing up, joining every conversation, keeping up appearances. Over time, that definition shifted. As his focus turned inward, he stopped engaging out of duty, not because he cared less, but because he no longer needed others to confirm his place in the world. He still cares about connection, but not if it relies on nonstop engagement, emotional performance, or subtle bargaining for approval. He doesn't step back out of resentment. He simply no longer finds value in maintaining relationships built on pretending or unspoken expectations. To those used to transactional connection, his presence can feel far away, but in reality, he's just not playing the same part anymore. He no longer speaks just to keep things smooth. He no longer views himself through other people's eyes. What appears in that space is not emptiness, but clarity, a calm self-reliance that lets him stay grounded even as others move in and out of his life. He's become honest with himself, and from that honesty, a deeper kind of freedom starts to form. From the outside, solitude is often misunderstood. To most, being alone signals a lack of friends, purpose, or belonging. But for a man who has started to see clearly, solitude becomes something entirely different. He no longer fills his schedule with distractions to avoid being alone with his own thoughts. He no longer seeks constant company to escape discomfort. He has learned to sit in silence without needing it to end. What others call loneliness is often just unfamiliar stillness. They confuse the absence of noise with the absence of meaning. He's realized that much of what fills an ordinary day, conversations, tasks, obligations, is just noise dressed up as necessity. In solitude, he sees himself without distortion. There is no one to impress, no image to manage, and that clarity, though uneasy at first, turns into strength. He doesn't stay away from people, but he no longer depends on them to feel whole. This change often puzzles others. They assume he must be withdrawn, cold, or self-important. But in truth, he is simply at ease in his own company. He has faced the silence most people avoid and discovered it wasn't emptiness at all. It was peace. As he becomes more stable within himself, he grows less predictable to others, not by choice, but because he no longer participates in the subtle exchanges that shape most social behavior. He doesn't mirror emotions to earn approval. He doesn't offer reassurance if it means denying what he sees. For those still relying on external validation, this is uncomfortable. They may see his neutrality as arrogance, his quiet as judgment, his distance as lack of care. In reality, he isn't any of those things. He's simply no longer invested in managing how others perceive him. Much of what is called connection is actually performance, a mutual agreement to maintain certain illusions. Once he steps outside that agreement, he disrupts it just by existing as he is. He doesn't argue, doesn't provoke, doesn't try to convince anyone. But the absence of familiar cues, praise, flattery, emotional cushioning makes people uneasy. Many of his old friendships start to fade, not because of arguments, but because the ground they stood on has dissolved. He begins to see how often relationships are held together by shared complaints, repeated routines, or mutual reinforcement of personal stories. When he stops feeding those patterns, the bond loosens on its own. He no longer feels obligated to agree just to belong. He no longer entertains conversations that deliberately avoid anything real. And he has no desire to maintain ties that require him to shrink himself. This isn't a rejection of others. It's simply the natural result of changing what he's willing to invest his energy in. Real friendship becomes quieter, simpler, and much rarer. It's no longer based on shared illusions, but on mutual recognition. Two people who don't need each other, yet choose to walk side by side without demand. These connections cannot be forced. They appear on their own, if they appear at all, and only when both people have stopped searching for someone to complete them. Most social interaction runs on unspoken rules. You validate my view, I'll validate yours. We stay on the surface. We don't question each other too much. We pretend we agree, even when we don't. He used to follow those rules because that's what everyone did. But once he begins operating outside of them, the whole pattern starts to crumble. He no longer offers comfort just to ease tension. He doesn't pretend to agree when he doesn't. He's finished with the small performances that keep everyone else comfortable while leaving him feeling false. This isn't rebellion. It's seeing clearly. And that clarity is disruptive because it reveals how much of daily life is built on mutual avoidance of truth. People notice. Even if they can't explain what's different, they feel the change. They sense that something familiar is no longer there. The ongoing trade of comfort, validation, and distraction. Without him feeding that system, it weakens. Conversations become awkward. People reach out less. What once felt warm and familiar now feels strained. Not because he's done something wrong, but because he stopped playing his assigned part. He hasn't abandoned anyone. He's simply stopped supporting a structure he no longer believes in. As his understanding deepens, something unexpected unfolds. He starts to need less, not just in terms of possessions, but emotionally, socially, even mentally. He no longer seeks recognition. He no longer relies on others to confirm what he already knows within himself. As that need fades, so do many of the relationships that depended on it. This is the paradox. The clearer he becomes, the quieter his life becomes. Not because he shut down, but because so much of what used to fill his time was driven by a search for external confirmation. Without that search, most social activity feels optional, if not irrelevant. He stops trying to be understood. He stops needing to justify himself. He no longer measures his worth by how much space he occupies in other people's lives. From the outside, this might resemble withdrawal. On the inside, it's the opposite, a settling into something steady and sincere. He still values connection, but only when it arises naturally, without pressure or performance. He hasn't turned cold. He's just no longer dependent. And in that detachment, there is a kind of depth that attachment alone can't offer. Once he wakes up, he can't unsee what he's seen. When he looks inward, the noise settles. When he looks outward, the world still seems asleep. He notices the false certainty in people's eyes, the parts they play, the beliefs they never question, the constant movement hiding an inner stillness they've yet to meet. He no longer envies what others label as connection because he understands the price. It often requires compliance, pretense, and conformity. He refuses to trade truth for the comfort of fitting in. Still, a part of him remembers. A part of him quietly hopes not for a crowd, not for attention, but for someone awake. Someone who has seen what he's seen and felt what he's felt. Someone who doesn't need him to be smaller, softer, or more agreeable just to feel secure. That kind of meeting is rare. It can't be manufactured, and he would rather wait in silence than pretend in conversation. So he walks alone, not because he enjoys separation, but because in a world still dreaming, authenticity is more precious than acceptance. Eventually, solitude stops feeling unusual. It becomes the norm, not barren, just still. He no longer views distance as a flaw to fix. He sees it for what it is, the natural outcome of no longer acting. While others surround themselves with constant noise, he has learned to live in quiet. While many chase attention, he moves without asking to be noticed. People often assume he must be lonely, as if any company is better than walking alone. But they confuse isolation with absence. He is not absent. He is simply done performing. He has come to favor the space that honesty creates over the closeness that illusion requires. This is the final shift. He doesn't need the world to wake up for him to feel whole. He doesn't need agreement to feel certain. He doesn't need validation to know who he is. He walks alone, yes, but not as an outsider. He walks as a man who has made peace with the cost of truth.